Welcome to Bits and Pieces Quilting. Today we are making a special quilt for a special person, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michelle. Look who I found.
Mom, Mary.
Mom and I are back at it again, sewing our little hearts out. And Mom, do you want to tell the viewers what we're going to be making today?
We are making a special quilt for a very special young man who's wheelchair and bed bound, and he loves Star Wars, loves Star Wars. So we're making him a special Star Wars quilt.
So we're going to take a pattern that we've already done, but we're going to change it. So this is going to be based on the carpenter's wheel, which we've already done, but we're going to resize the quilt, we're going to resize the blocks, and we're going to swap out the colors. So stay tuned. We've pulled out and looked through all the Star Wars fabrics, but because we want a really sharp contrast with the white, and this is the white, beige, mainly white, that we're going to use, we've put back anything with a white background, anything that would read more of a medium for the project. This is just a resized version and a flipped version of the carpenter's wheel that we did in a previous video, but I think it's going to look radically different because we've flipped the script and we've changed the darks and the lights. So this is going to be really interesting, but I want to preserve that contrast. So look at all these Star Wars fabrics. There's so many cool prints here, and it's going to be fun to mix them all up together for Dakota's star. Mom and I have done all the math for Dakota's star. And as always, we start in our notebook first, but I'll put a photo in here of the inspiration image. So Dakota uses a wheelchair. So we specifically wanted this project to be a little not taller and a little narrower. So I've resized both the design itself and the size of the individual blocks. So as you can see here, we're going to cut at 5 inches to make the half square triangles. Those will get squared to 4.5 and finish at 4. All of this will be in the pattern that you'll be able to get on my website at www.bitsandpiecesquilting.com. So the squares going into the quilt will be 4.5 inches to sew together, and then 4 inches, of course, in the finished quilt. I need a total of 72 half square triangles, which comes, divide that in half, comes from 36 sets, then 36 white squares and 60 patterned squares, and those will all get cut at 4.5 inches. So to make the half square triangles, we have put together a print fabric with the background fabric, drawn a diagonal line down the center, and it's hard to see on the white side. Actually, it's hard to see on this side too. We put a seam 1/4 inch on either side of that center diagonal line. And I'm just going to cut these apart and then square them up to 4.5 inches. So I'll get 2 half square triangles from each of these units. And you can see I've been working on some trimming as well. There's not a lot of waste when you start with a 5-inch square and square them up to 4.5 inches, but cutting off that extra just allows you to be a little bit more precise in the final project. To do the layout for Dakota's star, I'm using the same approach that I did for the carpenter's star. It's just that we've reversed where the lights and the darks are. So this is the top left quadrant. I think my computer just went dark. That's where I've got the design sitting there to guide me. In order to get a nice mix of fabrics across the quilt, I've taken every single piece and divided into piles of 4. So I know I have a nice even mix. So for example, there'll be one of these Darth Vaders in each of the 4 quadrants and one of these Star Wars blocks in each of the 4 quadrants. And now looking at it on video, I can see I probably want to swap those around. Those look like they're too close together for me, but I wanted to make sure there's a nice balance across this exploding star. And I think the chaos of all of these Star Wars themed fabrics is going to look really cool once we get it finished. Then to sew it together, I am going to use the webbing method. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. I'm going to stack all of these up into a pile, and then I'm going to sew all of these 2 together, leave them sewn. I'm not going to cut the pieces apart. Then I'm going to add the next row, the next row, the next row, the next row. If this is a new concept for you and you'd like me to demonstrate this in more detail in a future video, leave me a comment down below. It's a really efficient way of putting together something like this where all your blocks are exactly the same size. Once it's all laid out, it's just straight sewing. And then I'll lay out each of the next quadrants in order to sew them together and get this project complete. Mom and I have just had a little bit of an epiphany looking at this quadrant laid out. I was going to just stack all of the others for the other three quadrants on top of here, which is exactly what I did for the carpenter's wheel project. But I realized that's not going to work here because this is a rectangle and not a square. So this is 6 across by 7 blocks, and I can't lay that on top to turn it like this. I would be able to do this method in order to get the diagonal corresponding component, but because it's not actually a mirror image, I can't just turn it 90 degrees for the next quadrant. So that's not going to work at all. And I don't think, is it going to work for the upside down quadrant? I don't think it is either. So I think to be safe, I'm going to sew one quadrant together. And then because I really do want these directional pieces to be directional in the final project, I think I'll probably lay out each quadrant separately just to make sure I get the placement right. And then, of course, so the pieces will fit together properly. Here is the final Dakota's Star quilt. I love that exploding star shape from the center, and I think the white and the contrast with the Star Wars fabrics really sets it off. As I talked about in the video, I wanted to make sure that there was a top and bottom because there is some directional fabric. So the Star Wars and the Darth Vader, you can see that in all of the quadrants because of the way I divided up the fabric. Really happy with it, really happy with the chaos of dark Star Wars fabric. And there's a real I Spy element to it. Can you spy a BB-8? Can you spy an R2-D2? How about a little sugar skull Mandalorian down here? And there's just lots and lots of really interesting things to look at, little Yoda heads, all kinds of fun stuff. I like the size of it too. As I said, we resized both the quilt itself and the blocks. And to make it more rectangular, we added the row of squares top and bottom. So I think it'll better suit Dakota and his needs. So I hope you really like this quilt. Thanks very much for joining us for this episode of Bits and Pieces Quilting for Dakota's Star. I hope you enjoyed it. I think the quilt turned out beautifully, and I can't wait to hear about Dakota's reaction when he finally gets it. Thanks for sewing with me, Mom.
You're welcome.
I hope you had fun.
I had fun.